Manx Radio.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Faster my good afternoon. Mannin Line's on now. Open line through till 1. Call 66 13 68. Text or WhatsApp on 166 177. Email studio at manxradio.com. Whatever's on your mind, we had a few subjects that we were talking about last week, including whether or not we get value for money with the £3 million in university fees that are paid out. So when will we get the £3 million in university fees back from those who don't want to return to work here and pay tax after university? It's been a vexed question for quite a while of students who do get government support to go off the island and go to university. Daphne Kane said a while ago that the 3% rise in university fees across the board will cost us an extra £210,000 per year, on top of the $10 million we already pay every year towards around 1,000 students at university. These students are expected to pay a third of that back, but unfortunately many who choose never to return to the Isle of Man after graduating hardly pay anything back. So that means we're paying a minimum of £7 million a year to educate 1,000 students, with at least 300 of them never paying a penny in tax to the Isle of Man again. To the taxpayers who funded their education. Just a thought, that's something that's come into focus. And a message in from Tim, who said, Andy, could you, what's the situation with people asking people to take Manx flags down? I'll tell you more. Apparently, some Manx flags are on flagpoles that have always been flown for the TT. And apparently a marshal at Belaf has been telling people to take them down. And apparently, this is Skeet, by the way, so this may not be God's truth. The order came down from race control. I'm very angry about this, says Tim. Is this true that people have been told to take Manx flags down in Belaf by the course because of this? Right, so 2026 TT's underway. Now, remember, the roads will close. Full schedule is the mountain section will start to close at 4:45. The full TT mountain course will close at 6, and then you got qualifying tonight. Superbike, Superstock, Supersport, Superbike, sidecars, and all roads will reopen no later than 9:30. So let's hope everything goes well. Certainly after last night, that's weird, strange incident that took place in Ramsey. We keep our fingers crossed. Anyway, Julian's first with us today. Hi, Julian.
Hi, Andy. It was good to hear there were no fatalities in yesterday's practice.
I've never heard of anything like that before. Have you?
No, but I see that the viewing area at Parliament Square will no longer be available.
That's right.
But the accident happened round the corner on Albert Road. And just, I don't know, I'm somewhat concerned that what's not being mentioned is that there's a new patch of tarmac on that corner. So I would imagine it might be as well for the riders to assess that, because I think they did a bit of resurfacing on Albert Road. So, we need to concentrate on what the actual problem was rather than just, the point where nobody actually... I mean, it is straight on. I mean, Solby Bridge, they stopped people sitting on the wall there for the same reason, but the actual accident happened on Albert Road, so I think we need to concentrate on what actually happened. Yesterday's Isle of Man TV programme, Ralph Peake from the Energy and Sustainability Centre was interviewed. He's also the Business Sustainability Lead at the Chamber of Commerce. He said something interesting during the interview about Moor Vannin, and I'll quote him exactly. Once you actually get permission to actually use that area for wind turbines, then you can actually put together a deal. So this is basically exactly the same point I was making about Orsted's lawyer at the 7th hearing of the Moor Vannin consenting hearings. Ralph Peake is saying the same thing as Orsted. Don't mention the financial benefits at the consenting hearings. We'll deal with it later. Ralph Peake also said, imagine 100% renewables, electricity prices are half of what they are now, and even in some cases free. Except, of course, the reality is that despite the UK having deployed over 12,000 large wind turbines, it's one of the highest electricity prices in the world. So I don't quite understand where this half the current prices and we will have free in some cases, because the proof of the pudding's in the eating, isn't it, Andy?
Well, if only somebody somewhere would actually give us a price, and you know the price I'm going to quote and the figure I'm going to quote, that's the important, that's the measure of it all. That's the, if you like, that's the yardstick, and that's 29p. If only and I have to say, hats off to Laurie Hooper, MHK, because 2-3 years ago he came on Mannin Line and said, if only they'd quote something like 10p. If they'd suddenly say your electricity is going to be no more than 10p per kilowatt hour, suddenly everybody will queue up behind them. So it's as though they don't quite understand what's the selling point of this. I know they laud the greenness of it and the net zero and the sustainability and everything. Really, is that the thing at the top of people's minds, Julian?
Well, what's at the top of my mind is that when the price went up, the price of gas went up astronomically to almost 800 pence a therm. It's now stabilised for a long time now, and it's roughly around between 70 and 80 pence. So it's dropped 10 times. So why are we still paying 29.5p? We should be back at least down around 20. So the prices seems to be being held up artificially. The UK, one of the highest electricity prices in the world, and the only one that's higher is Denmark, who've gone even further with renewables. So the reality is, renewables, when you put them in, they're the highest ones. You go to places like America, where they don't have in a particular state any renewables, and they're paying 8p a unit or 6p a unit. And they're using gas power stations. Malta is paying 12p a unit, and they're only using liquefied natural gas off a ship, which has to be degasified. So how is Malta paying 12p when all they use is gas?
Well, I think it's what we get used to, isn't it? I mean, everybody gets used to paying that amount of money, so you psychologically park it and move on. And the trouble is, though, that because we've been used to paying high electricity prices, in fact, high prices for most things. I mean, keeping warm on the Isle of Man in the wintertime is an expensive business. And the thing is that we're almost sort of led to feel guilty about the fact that we're going to stay warm. It's as though somebody pats us on the head and said, there, we'll do it for you, but it will cost you.
Yeah, but renewables are not talking about heating. They're only talking about electricity. The vast majority of the people on the island, the massive amount of energy that's required to heat our houses is coming from oil or gas.
Yeah, but there are lots of people who do use electricity, and people who do use electricity also to cool, air conditioning. I mean, let me just say, at Manx Radio, we've got a big air conditioning plant which runs all the time, and that's electric.
Well, I've made the point before that air conditioners are way cheaper than heat pumps. You don't have to plumb it into your larger radiators, and they only weekly heat because they're using 40 degrees Celsius. It's much lower than gas boilers that are up in the 60s and 70s. So if we're in a global warming, why aren't we using air conditioners to cool us down then? If the logic is it's getting warmer by, what do they say, 1.5 degrees and blah, blah, blah. Well, we need cooling then, but they're not even offering that. A Mitsubishi air conditioning unit is less than half the price of a heat pump installation, probably a quarter if you include all that installation labour. The other point that Ralph Peake made, which is not correct, is that the Walney extension is very, very close to our territorial boundary. It's not. It's 17 miles away to the nearest turbine with the Walney extension. And they are 6 times smaller swept area and half the height. What we're talking about is twice the height, 6 times the swept area, and they're only 6 to 8 miles away. So they're going to appear enormous compared to what we're looking out at.
And didn't Ørsted say, aren't they going to pipe the electricity from Moor Vannin to the Walney extension, because they're kind of tapping into that circuit there to take it to the UK?
Ostensibly, yes. And of course, Ørsted has also said, and I think the words were, we are not legally bound to provide any energy to the Isle of Man. Well, with Ørsted, you've got to be careful with the words. And that brings me to another point. If anyone goes on Ørsted.im, you've got mixed messages coming out of their website. When you first go on Ørsted.im, there is a link that clicks to an information booklet, which is a downloadable PDF. And if you look in that, it says the lifetime financial benefits to the islands from the Moor Vannin offshore wind farm will be around 2 billion. So they say will be around. So around is vague, will more definite. However, instead of clicking on that link, if you go into the menu, go to Moor Vannin and then go to delivering benefits, so straight on the website, it says something different. It says Moor Vannin would deliver approximately 2 billion. So you still got the around and the approximately, but there's the use of the word would as against will. And if you ask any lawyer or an advertising company, if you use the word would, that is not the same as using the word will. It would be like, you have a huge water leak at home and you call a plumber and say, can you get here for 8 o'clock? If he says I will, that's very different from I would, because normally I would is usually followed by but. I'm busy at the moment. So Ørsted on the Manx website are using would and will on the same website. So there's this use of language. You've got language saying that the consenting panel shouldn't think about the financial benefits when they're weighing up the consenting, which of course would mean that if they just say, all right, okay, we'll let it through, then you're back to probably talking to Treasury behind closed doors like they've been doing for about 10 years.
Well, somebody somewhere is making decisions and we don't know. I mean, it may be that everything works out fine and the government and Ørsted come to some sort of deal and we're all going to be in clover for the next 50 years because of the amount of money that's going to be generated. The trouble is, at the moment, we don't know. And all we get told is, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. It's commercially confidential. Trust us. We're the nice guys.
Well, Ørsted's lawyer, Amy Sterling, was actually pressed on when do we start getting any of these benefits, even though they won't say what it is. And she used the word at the point of generation. Now, Ralph Peet yesterday said that's 10 years from now. And we don't know if it's inflation-proofed. You've also got the news that DHSC, they've had 50 million extra for the Manx care already, and now they're asking for another nearly 21 million. So if we're getting 57 million a year from this Moor Vannin thing in 10 years, and you think how much things have gone up in the last 10 years, I mean, is that going to be 57 million in 10 years without inflation? We're burning away at 70 million extra in 1 year extra just to do Manx care. And there's no talk about if the consenting panel is not allowed to talk about the financial benefits when they're weighing up, which looks to be the final hurdle for this Moor Vannin thing, so it's very important. What about the negatives like tourism or the fisheries or travel, messing around with getting the boat out or the planes? You know, they're not even, if you can't talk about the financial benefits, you can't talk about those either.
Okay.
So, yeah,
right.
I don't know, unequal arguments. Thanks very much, Andy.
Thanks for calling today. We appreciate your opinion. Thanks, Julian. Here's Nathan with us now. Hi, Nathan.
Hi, Andy.
What's on your mind?
Andy? Hello?
Yeah, you're live on the air, Nathan. What's on your mind?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I just following up from the previous caller, not the last one, the last one before that, about the crash in Ramsey yesterday.
Yeah.
He's right about like coming from the cause of why it crashed and not moving the people, and why it's moved from why they're moving the people, but why are they not assessing why he's crashed. But if they're going to move everyone, if there's a crash, say in Solby, and there's a crash in Kirkmichael, and there's a crash in Crosby, they can't move everyone from the course because no one will bother coming over, and the Isle of Man will be dead in TT week, and they'll just watch it on ITV4 instead.
Well, that's one of the draws, isn't it? The fact that you can watch it free of charge, stand in most places, standing by the side of the road, and get close to the action.
Yeah, I know. There's no feeling like watching a bike go 120 mile an hour past you, but people are going to resort to that if they can't watch it in real life because you're banned from watching around the course. I think it's absurd how they're moving people from around the course when I know that people got injured that were spectating, but that's the risk we've got to take to watch the bikes.
Right. Okay. All right, Nathan, we appreciate that. Thanks for calling today. Of course, at the moment, we don't quite know what the situation is, and we'll wait to hear what the cause of the crash was. And obviously, at the moment, that particular the spectator point is withdrawn from use at the moment. Got a message in WhatsApp in with a couple of nice photos of the mountain. Two coaches, two big single-deck coaches have a legal right to use the mountain road during TT fortnight, but I would have thought common sense would have prevailed. It was proving very dangerous for visiting motorcycles to overtake. The coaches were tail to tail at 10:30 this morning on the mountain road. And thank you for those pictures. A message in also to say, your caller Julian is right. Renewable energy can be expensive, but in response to that, it's a small amount to pay for slowing down catastrophic effects of climate change, flooding, drought, global warming, says Big John in Ramsey. Thank you for that. And the IPCC, says Ian, this is the climate change people, recently released an article stating that the last 30 years' climate doomsday predictions have been grossly overestimated, bordering on fear-mongering. The IPCC, this is Ian WhatsApping, the IPCC don't really have much choice but to make that statement, as London isn't underwater. The ice caps are still here, polar bear numbers are up, and crops are still growing. With this in mind, with a very high probability that Reform, this is a UK political party, will be in power at the next election, isn't it time that the Isle of Man had a re-evaluation on this ridiculous net zero, this is Ian's words by the way, ridiculous net zero agenda? The planet is on fire narrative is starting to get boring, says Ian. And a final message, and we get back to the phones. Where are the flags at the Grandstand? Says Link in Oncombe. Where are the flags at the Grandstand? We'll try and find out. Here's Bonzo with us now. Hi, Bonzo.
Yes, well, listening to the usual sort of litany of misinformation about renewables and climate damage. Well, let's start with Ian, shall we? Perhaps he'd like to live in India at the moment, where in some parts of India it has reached 55 degrees centigrade, which is pretty much the limit of, very near the limit of human endurance.
And is it a place where it's been 55 degrees before?
No. No, it's the kind of place that might experience top temperatures in the mid-30s or something, but certainly not 55.
You wonder,
in that kind of place where you have humidity as well.
Is the Indian government taking this seriously, do you think? Do you think they're mitigating their enormous use of coal?
Well, they're trying to, but of course they're having to because of the lack of oil at the moment.
Right. Anyway,
because at the moment they're actually rationing fuel.
Right. Okay. And
as I recall, but when we come to all these other things as well, like the crops are still growing. Well, no, they're not quite. And of course, there are the problems when you have then now rather more rainy winters rather than snowy winters. that then the growing season gets interrupted because the ground's at one point the ground is absolutely waterlogged and it stuffs the seeds that you've planted.
Well, that's a fair point on the Isle of Man, Bonzo, because at the moment I was talking to a farmer at the weekend who said there's no dust at the moment. The land isn't dusty yet, and normally it would be at this time of year, and that's purely because we had so much rain between January and April. So the Isle of Man's noticed that.
Oh, quite. And then you get to the next bit where when your crops are trying to get to their best point, then it's absolutely blazing and rain, and then your yields are down. So these problems, they're already being reflected in the price of food and the knock-on of transport costs in the price of food as well. With the problems in the Middle East. Are going to come down the line, in the autumn, and they're going to bite pretty hard. Which then comes to power. The reason why we have high electricity prices that haven't come down is because, of course, we have a ruddy great debt from the from the MEA loan scam.
Yeah.
So, what they've been doing is obviously trying to hang on to as much money as coming in as possible in order to drive down that debt, which I believe is something that's been stated in...
it has, and the thing is, it may be interesting to know if when we do get electricity bills, they could kind of compartmentalise the bill and say this is for the actual electricity and this is for our financial position, because it would be interesting to know. And of course they're still selling electricity via the interconnector as well, so they're making money out of that, but at the moment obviously not many people forensically investigate their electricity bill, but it would be nice to know, and because we don't all flit around all the time, we don't compare electricity prices. We know what we pay, and that's that. There are a few people who go here, there, and everywhere and know what the differences are, but not everybody does, Bonzo.
Well, I think that's something perhaps for the next Timwell to address, that it might oblige MUA to do that when it sends out bills.
Okay.
No, when it sends that statement, that's one thing. But also the comparison of renewables pricing. The thing is, renewables pricing in UK is linked to the price of gas. So obviously it's going to be expensive.
Could you explain how that works?
Well, yes, the amount that is charged, and then the assessment on contracts for difference is tied to the global price of gas, because gas is the predominant item in the generation mix for UK power. So, they use that as the baseline.
Right.
But actually, renewable power costs less than that, and indeed, if we're talking about generation cost per unit, and indeed could be even lower. But here we are again. It's all about, these things are dreadful, these things are wrong and bad. But as I've said before, my analysis on things like, the offshore wind farm, let's not get these things confused again, the offshore wind farm, it's about the money. It was never about giving the Isle of Man, mates rates electricity or free electricity. Yeah, well, it wouldn't be free anyway, even if it was to, went around being extremely generous and providing it for nothing to MUA, because MUA still have then the costs of, taking that electricity into the system, and then No, that again is lunacy. So I don't know what Ralph Peake is getting his ideas from. Outer space, by the sound of it. But the big problem with Orsted, of course, is about the money. Now, now it's being 55 or 59 million a year. over 30 years, which then comes to be, was it 35 years? 35 years, that's right, which then sort of comes to be 2 billion-ish. Well, is that index linked? Because if it isn't index linked, it's worse than useless. But the actual number itself is too low anyway. It needs to be at the minimum 100 million a year, and that being index linked as well over the term.
So you reckon that 100 million would start to take the nasty taste out of some people's mouths regarding this? Obviously everybody has their price. We all have our price. At what point do you think that would start to make sense and would start to, if you like, weigh easier on the Manx people, Bonzo?
Well, as I say, I think as I've said before, I think it's part of the negotiating position. Also, the idea that you're going to have 1,200-foot turbines. Maybe. Because it's a question of you can have fewer turbines, but they're bigger, or you have more turbines, but they're not so tall. And so there'll be some horse trading, and then all of a sudden it will, there'll only be the 800-foot one, and then the Isle of Man government can say, oh yes, we've protected the island's view, and Woolstead can then say, and that, well yes, we've been reasonable and we've been listening. But also the fact is that they could then, if we didn't get a deal, they would then just put 1,200-foot turbines up, at the edge of Walney. They just replace the ones they've got there with the big ones. So they would still spoil the view. Yeah. And when you look, as I mentioned last time, when you look at all of the wind arrays that are proposed going to be under construction in 10 years' time, we'll be looking around and we will have a view of wind turbines, none of which will be giving the island a penny for spoiling the view.
My word.
So when you consider those things, you consider, well, yes, it's perhaps not what you'd want, but if you get the value from the deal, so that you have 100 million a year, that is then continues to have the real terms value of 100 million a year from when you started throughout the 35 years, then that I think would be something that people could look at and go, yes, I can think about that.
Are you confident that the government can cut a good deal?
Oh, no. It needs professional, hard-nosed people who can do it, and people with the right kind of experience. Strangely enough, there are those kind of people in Tynwald at the moment. People like Gary Clewett. He's a Treasury member, but he has extensive global business experience, and I think if he was placed in a room with Orsted would very soon learn how things were supposed to work.
Okay. All right, Bonzo, we appreciate your call. Thanks for calling today.
Okay, cheers.
All right, it's 26 minutes before 1. Is the Manx flag removal, says Sarah P. in Honkin, a hot Honkin that is the Manx flag removal because they could be mistaken for red flags if they're too near the course? Maybe just a precaution rather than anything against the Manx flag. And Pam in Ramsey said, what happened in Parliament Square yesterday has happened before a few years ago at the hairpin involving a sidecar outfit, if I remember correctly. And Liz said, I know it's a great shame, but I've often thought that the Manx flags flown near the course could be mistaken for red flags, race flags. At the speeds, it will be just a red blur. And Karen said, I just saw two people on e-scooters fly up Prospect Hill and go through a red light by Standard Bank on the corner there. So expect accidents with people on e-scooters that they've bought from the adjacent aisle. Aren't e-scooters illegal over here? And James said, I just thought you keep referring to the magical 29p per kilowatt hour. You need to remember that regardless of whether or not the Eristane project goes ahead in the south, the price of electricity is going to rise over the years. Nothing stays the same. Oh, that's quite right. And prices normally go up, James. I admit that. It's just that we pay a lot more for electricity than other people do. I know the Isle of Man is better than most other places, but really, when you hear some of the prices that people pay here, there and everywhere, and are we paying a lot of that price, that 29p, purely to sort out the Manx Electricity, the MEA or MUA's financial position? I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It would be nice to know, though. Here's Juan with us now. Hi, Juan.
Costa del Douglas, Andy. Are you going out for a suntan this afternoon?
Isn't it lovely?
I don't think everyone that was on the beaches yesterday and they were packed was bothered about global warming somehow. They were certainly enjoying the weather. I'd been about and about this weekend. I've been a bit of a tourist. I was on the trams and the trains, and I've got to say, what a fantastic heritage events that we've got here. The trams and the trains run perfectly. Really good service, good timetable, brilliant for tourists, and I think well priced as well. If you get the connecting ticket for like 4 or 5 days, I think they're absolutely brilliant value. And I popped in, I was talking to Connie Lovell on Friday at the opening of the Manx National Heritage Tourist Centre in Castletown Square. And they've done a really good job there. I don't know if you've been down to the square this week, Andy.
That's the old Barclays, isn't it?
It is, yes. Yeah, and they've got the big screen up for the TT, and they've got their deck chairs there. And I think it had a really, really nice vibe around the whole of Castletown Square. I think it's well done, and I think the Heritage Centre there is really good as well.
And I think, is it this Saturday there's going to be a big market around the whole square as well in Castletown?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe so. It's going to be. They've done it really nice. I've got to say they've done it nice. But I've got to say I tried to go up to Snaefell yesterday, but the electricity was down, so there was no trams. Everyone up there was stuck, and everyone in Laxey was stuck. So the future's electric. Even when it was Victorian, they still had problems. I was walking through town yesterday and through the Sunken Gardens, and had to notice the state of the railings. I take it that's Douglas City Council that are in charge of them. They just seem to have been left for years to rack and ruin. I mean, you can push your finger and flake through them now, and I'm just wondering what they're up to with all the railings. I mean, I keep talking about the ones on the promenade by the Palace Hotel. 4 years now, and they're still got a little bit of rope across it and a cone, and all these railings down in the Sunken Gardens are terrible state, and it's just lack of maintenance, because if there'd have been a maintenance program them over the years, hammering down and hammeriting, they'd have been fine. So I just wonder why there's no maintenance scheme on that. It's quite embarrassing, really, when you look at the state of them, why they've not been kept up.
Well, the thing is that we always get warm words whenever we mention this to representatives or politicians. They all talk about, we visit, we value our visitors with the people who come on the cruise ships and this, that, and the other. It's just that years ago, remember the Isle of Man had a 13-week season. It was a 13-week season, and everybody involved in tourism had to take, 3-4 times money in that week in tourism. So everything was done. Everything was painted. Everything was cleaned. Everything was as it should be. And we knew how to do tourism. We used to do it really, really well. It just seems as though we have people now who, if you like, what's the one modern word? Deprioritise it.
Yeah, and I was talking Saturday morning. I was at Andre Richer's presentation, who's standing for Middle, and we touched on, Keith Lord was there, and we touched on a bit of tourism and such like there. And it's a shame. I think it needs a good kick up the butt to sort these little bits out, because it's not hard stuff to sort out, and it's not expensive stuff to sort out. It's just a program with someone interested in doing this small stuff and getting it right.
Well, I mean, the thing is that there are places where it does cost a lot of money. You mentioned Connie Lovell, the boss of Manx National Heritage, who will always tell you that, the Manx National Heritage estate has seen better days. Let's face it, we know and love the House of Mannin, but it's not what it used to be. And that will cost, several £100,000 to get right. There are places, and M&H's most expensive cost is people, it's its staff. So, getting M&H right, and, it's one of our showcases, it's one of our grandstand events, if you like, all the venues for Manx National Heritage, but getting all that right, and year by year, it's slipping behind. M&H people know that, everybody knows it. M&H needs more money.
And I spoke with Connie about that, and you talking about the House of Mannin, and I've mentioned it on this programme about a lot of the artefacts that were taken out of Castle Rushen, which are in store, and I mentioned this to her. Why not use the empty rooms that, are stuff that's now broken and it's not used in empty rooms in the House of Mannin, put the artefacts in there and use them. That you've got them. It's not costing you anything to do them. Just put them in there, place them in there, and liven it up. So there is things that you can do, just a little bit thinking outside the box that doesn't cost a lot of money, I think.
Well, it might be a start to get a cafe in the Manx Museum.
Well, yeah, maybe. And on a finishing note, Andy, I was at the incident yesterday at the Ramsey Point for the racing, and I've got to say that the marshals, the paramedics, the police, the ambulances done an absolutely fantastic job. They were on top of everything. They were efficient. Ambulance was there. The ground end air ambulance was there. And I've got to say, the work that they all did, the Orange Army and everyone, was absolutely superb. I hope the young one gets better quick that was flown away. But I looked at the organisation, the way that they approached it, the way that they sorted it out, went and checked everyone was okay, asked everyone if they were fine, took statements from people. I thought they couldn't have done anything more in the situation.
And that's the important thing to stress, Ewan, is that what happened yesterday was grim. There's no getting away from it. It was grim. Yeah. But the fact is, all the coping mechanisms were there and everything happened as it should do. And, of course, hats off to the marshals, that army that do such a great job. So, let's hope that everything turns out okay, Ewan.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's all I wanted to say on that subject there. I mean, I viewed from that point of quite a few times, and I know the angles that them bikes go, and it was freak. Whatever's happened was freak, so it ended up over there. But them guys were certainly on the ball yesterday. Everyone, the police, the ambulance, everyone, absolutely superb.
All right,
cheers, Andy.
Good to hear from you. 2 people have been flown to the UK for specialist care following an incident during yesterday's TT practice. The chief exec of Manx Care has confirmed the rest of the people injured on the exit of Parliament Square have now been discharged from Noble's Hospital. Day 1 of the opening free practice session of TT 2026 was suspended after an incident with a rider and 8 spectators. Here's the boss of Manx Care, Teresa Cope.
Our thoughts and best wishes are with all of the people who were involved in yesterday's incident and those who witnessed it, because it's, it is one of those elements of racing, but equally when you're faced with something like that, it is difficult. In terms of an update this morning, I think the positive news is that the majority of those people involved in yesterday's incident have been discharged from hospital, and 2 patients are in England receiving specialist care. With all of these incidents, we debrief immediately afterwards. It's important we understand any learning from those incidents and what we can take into our future planning. But I think it is important that this is what we planned for. We hope it never happens, but this is what we planned for.
And I know, given some of the recent pressures at the hospital, and you know what people are like on social media, I mean, there might be some people worried about what would happen if they needed hospital treatments while at an incident like this going on, of course. I mean, what reassurances, can Manx Care give the public to those non-racing incidents?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think, we plan and we staff up accordingly. We understand the increased numbers of people that come onto the island, and we take the big picture. So, what happened yesterday whilst we were responding to that incident, there was another road traffic collision, and there were other incidents happening simultaneously, all which was dealt with by the team. So we take the holistic approach. All our teams respond together, and yes, we place equal importance on making sure the island's population are well looked after during TT, as well as making sure we support the racing event.
Teresa Cope, the chief exec of Manx Care, talking about what happened yesterday. TT organisers have now said the spectators won't be able to use the viewing area at Parliament Square for the remainder of the 2026 TT races. So that isn't going to be available, they say, given the unusual nature of the incident, and following a safety review, the precautionary measure has now been implemented.
Many people are struggling. You can help by volunteering or making a donation to Isle of Man Food Bank, whether it be food or essential items or financial support. Please call 646 999, brought to you by Descon Office Interiors.
The exclusive Karcher store is open with thousands of products, accessories and parts in stock. For Karcher sales and service, Hersham Electrical, Shipyard Industrial Estate, Ramsey.
Drive smarter, drive more reliable, drive a great deal at Mannin Motors, with a superb range of cars for every budget, always available. And if we don't have it, we'll source it. Plus, servicing, valeting and prestige detailing too. Mannin Motors, Richmond Hill, Douglas. Find us on Facebook or call 420 420. That's 420 420. Drive a better bargain at Mannin Motors.
Healthcare can often feel disjointed, uncoordinated and lonely, especially when off-island care is required. That is not the case at Clinic Savoir. With clinics in Douglas and Ramsey, Clinic Savoir is the first private integrated healthcare service to bring together Manx GPs, specialists and carefully selected partners who all work together to ensure your care is completely focused on you. Call 682,000 or visit clinicsavour.com. Take the next step with Clinic Savoir.
The team at Nicola Bowker & Co. specialise in supporting local businesses with the expertise, practical help and advice that you've been seeking. Whether accounts, tax, payroll or expertise along your business journey, find the friendly, professional support you need at Nicola Bowker & Co.
For TT 2026, Manx Radio Motorsport is on the air. We'll bring you full commentary of all the TT qualifying and race sessions right across the fortnight, interviews with all the top riders, along with all the latest weather and travel news.
Listen at motorsport.manxradio.com, our smartphone app, DAB and AM 1368.
Manx Radio Motorsport, the best biking station in the world. Sponsored by Tesco.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Look at that time now. It's 12 minutes before 1. David's with us now. Hi, David.
Hi, Andy. I just want to support, actually, if you're still listening to me, about Bonzo. What a practical solution he was saying, or giving us an insight into what can happen when we go to this planning application, when we finally get the full details.
Yeah.
And that's the issue. Nobody knows the full details, do they?
And that's it, really. And we, the public, are sitting in the middle. Orsted on one side, the government on the other side. And, the people who it's really, really going to affect, we're sitting in the middle and everybody's saying, trust us. Orsted is saying, trust us. And the government's saying, trust us.
Well, I know who I would believe at the present time, and it's not the government. But anyway, I was trying to persuade you some time ago to get Mr. Wanningberg on, who's the chairman of the Manx Utilities. A is to find out what the debt is at the minute. B, what their concerns would be for down south, because the turbines there are smaller and they're going to be on island, and we're going to have use of them, aren't we? I was down there the other week, and there's one down by Gansey Beach there, just off there. There's a turbine just running around all the time, and I just wondered who that fella is. I think the guy's been on before and says he makes electricity for himself on that. So if they'd like to come on sometime and tell us what they do, and for those that are interested, I'm making 3.5 kilowatts on my panels, and my battery's full, and I can't shunt it anywhere because I can't get a grant for another battery.
Turn all the televisions on.
Well, I'd love to, but this is the issue, isn't it? DEFRA the other day there, I thought it was really pathetic, really, that they haven't got the scheme up and running to support people who may have a few bob, but not got enough money to put another battery up.
Well, the thing is, David, it seems like they think it's a good idea. People know it's a good idea. But the trouble is, in the middle of this, a bit of finance. And if the government's really serious about wanting the public, us, to get on board with this, why don't they make it easy for us to do it?
And that's the whole story. The other thing was, too, if you listen to the construction industry this morning there, is that not many builders, we haven't got enough tradesmen or young apprentices. I'd like to find out really how much the government have taken on for skilled workers and how many people have come out of college and not got an actual job, a trade. That's right across the board, you know what I mean? Plasterers, plumbers, electricians or whatever, all the way down the line. Because if we don't keep them trained on the island, or these companies don't pick them up to be trained, we're going to have to import.
And that's you're 100% right, because the thing is, those skills within the construction industry, and as you say, everybody from carpenters, chippies, brickies, plasterers, plumbers, everybody who does that, we need them. We need their skills, and they've got to remain employed. We've got to have youngsters coming on to do it as well. We've simply got to keep the construction industry working on the Isle of Man, and no ifs, buts, or maybes. David, I think that really has to happen, don't you?
It does, 100%. And listen, the other thing is, too, that with government, it's a subject for another day, but anyway, there are projects which local authorities, and our local authority, could do one, actually, is to construct something. We don't own the land, but government owns quite a lot of land, so why doesn't government give the local authorities a challenge to build something that they actually need for their community, and we can get some work done and fulfill some obligations instead of this government doing zero. All
right. Good to hear from you. Thanks for that.
Bye.
Cheers. Now, 8 minutes before 1. Can Mr. Crookall, this is Colin who dropped a note in, can Mr. Crookall or somebody at the DOI please sort out the shambles at the Vehicle Test Centre regarding vehicle tax licences? A relative went to renew their licence only to find the queue was out of the door and only one person was serving. I thought the staff from the sea terminal had been deployed there to ease the pressure. It's a disgrace, says Colin. This story about education and about the amount of money we pay and whether or not we're getting value for money, the Education Minister says she's hopeful that higher education options will become more accessible to people on the Isle of Man. Some MHKs have questioned whether the government should be keeping tabs on how taxpayer-backed financial support is used and what benefits it brings back to the Isle of Man. Paying for people to go to university. Daphne Kane said follow-up checks after grants were used would be impractical.
We have prioritised getting the student awards system up and running for those students who'll be applying now for courses starting in September. The new 2025 regulations widen the offering so that those students deciding for distance learning to stay on the island are now able to access tuition fee contributions to the same level as going away. We've also significantly increased the income level for obtaining the maintenance grant, up to now over £30,000, and then that is tapered off over up to the £90,000 cut off for child benefit. So there's also very much increased benefits for students with disabilities to access support for equipment, and the aim is to make the further higher education learning accessible much more widely across. But I do acknowledge that in doing so, the concerns raised by members include that squeezed middle again, those people at the top of the £112,000 household income, who then with multiple children or with multiple expenses, including mortgages, may actually struggle to support their young people to have the best experience of going away to university. So there are policy considerations for the future.
Daphne Kane, MHK, and Gaz dropped a note in to say it's madness that the government's financing Manx students to study and then leave the Isle of Man, while it's then bringing in immigrant workers. The downturn in job availability for young people in the UK may perhaps result in a few more students coming back to the Isle of Man. It's an investment, isn't it? We invest in our students. It's just that some just don't come back. Linda said, where are the flags at the Grandstand? The ones on the top of the Grandstand seating, the whole posts have been taken down and not replaced. Why is this? Well, we've checked. The flags and posts above the TT Grandstand seating are linked to the wider redevelopment of the Grandstand scoreboard area. Wow. The original scoreboard structure opposite the Grandstand was removed in 2020 after the Department for Enterprise said it had suffered structural damage and was no longer considered fit for purpose. Plans were later approved for a replacement combining traditional styling with modern digital screens, but we reported in 2024 that the permanent replacement project is currently on hold because funding has not yet been secured. Temporary digital display screens have continued to be used during the TT and MGP. Instead, there's no official indication that the removal of the flag post is connected to another case of scoreboarditis. Specifically, but the whole Grandstand and scoreboard areas have been undergoing phased changes linked to the long-term redevelopment plan. That's the story. I note it, this is an opinion, by the way, this is an opinion programme. Not everything you hear is, when people say things, it's their opinion. And this is Daphne's opinion in Mackle. Orsted don't care about the Manx people. Watch out for the mass migration. Then where will the tax payments come from to keep the island financially afloat? It's criminal what they're planning to our bit of heaven, says Daphne. Well, Daphne lives in Mackle, so if the turbines go up, she'll have a Grandstand view. Back tomorrow with another open line. In the meantime, if you want to get in touch or leave a message, 682-631, the Mannin Line answer phone, or email manninline@manxradio.com. Otherwise, call tomorrow. It's another open line. Text, email, call and WhatsApp. Thank you, Chris, on the phones today.